Welcome back to Mom in Mind. I'm your host, Dr. Kat. On our episode today, we are talking about a topic that is near and dear to my heart, which is what it's like to be a highly sensitive person, and more specifically, what it's like to be a highly sensitive parent. Those of you who've been listening to the podcast for a while know that I am one of those. Our guest today, Amy Lajeunesse, is going to be talking about what it's like to be a highly sensitive person and parent. Also, what ways sensory overload and multiple competing expectations cause parents stress. And if you know what I'm talking about already, you know what we mean. Not only that, but she's going to share with us some ways to reduce sensory overload and overstimulation, as well as how to create some realistic expectations for yourself as a parent. There are many gifts that come with being a highly sensitive person and highly sensitive parent. And Amy's going to talk a little bit about how to leverage that in order to support yourself and your relationship with your children. Amy is a psychotherapist and parenting coach with nearly a decade of experience working in the field of mental health and wellness. She is passionate about teaching highly sensitive, empathic, and overwhelmed moms how to harness their strengths and manage challenges in order to thrive in parenthood. Amy provides therapy for women and parents in California and offers resources, courses, and video coaching for highly sensitive parents around the world at highlysensitiveparenthood.com. And at the end of our episode today, I'm going to share with you that Amy is offering Mom and Mind listeners a nice discount on some of her resources. So for now, let's meet Amy. Welcome, Amy. I'm super excited to have you on. Talking about HSP and parenting is one of my favorites. So thanks so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to share and chat about this really important topic.
Absolutely. It is so important. And the more people I talk to in therapy, specifically with perinatal mental health, the more clear it is how many HSP folks come to therapy because of all of the things you're about to talk about. All of the things.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think for some of us, myself included, our HSP trait, it's there all along. And after, becoming pregnant or birthing or adopting or just becoming a parent in general, we realize that it kind of comes to the forefront a little bit more, or certain aspects of being sensitive show up more in the day to day. And it just becomes, I would say, more important to address and also just really take care of ourselves at that time.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah, for sure. So you alluded to us, meaning you, also. So yeah, it'd be great to know how you got to understand HSP and parenting.
Yeah, so I think I knew I was an HSP. I didn't necessarily have the language for it, as a kid or a teenager. But I'd say starting in kind of my mid-20s, I came across the term and found it to be really helpful. Dr. Elaine Aron's work on that trait to be really informative
Mm-hmm.
about who I was and the way that I experienced the world. And when I became a parent, it became more clear that my sensitivity, the way that I experienced the world, I think had kind of magnified after I had a child. And I think it had a little bit to do with sort of the ways that the nervous system and our bodies shift when we become parents. But yeah, in retrospect, looking back on that time, I didn't necessarily understand fully in the moment what was going on.
Mm-hmm.
But especially after having my second child, just the overstimulation of having kids, and for me having two kids at that point, led to some pretty intense experiences physically. I had a panic attack that was so incapacitating that I literally couldn't stand up or hold my baby for a few minutes, which was really, really scary at that time. And
Yeah.
I was a trained mental health professional. I
Mm-hmm.
was, I think, fully licensed at that time, and I even at that time didn't really have an understanding of this fitting into perinatal mood and anxiety disorders, and how overstimulation from having children touching you and crying and having needs
Mm.
and not having adequate downtime was really impacting my mental and physical health. So it's become a passion of mine since then to support other highly sensitive parents who may not fit into a neat box of postpartum depression or postpartum anxiety, but who
Mhm.
find parenting hard for a variety of reasons because of their sensitivity.
Yeah. Yeah,
Mhm.
absolutely. And as you experienced and I did too, you just don't know until you know
Mhm.
about how like, oh, wow, I am really sensitive because this
Mhm.
kid crying is feels like I'm going to lose my mind.
Mhm.
And I'm not saying that non-HSP folks don't experience that to some
Yeah.
extent, but it's just different. It's
Mhm.
just different
Right. I think for HSPs, I always think of it as like the volume's just turned up. And so,
for sure.
the moment I have a mental snapshot of this moment where I think, breastfeeding the baby, and my older child was crawling on my back and saying, "Mommy, mommy, mommy, mommy."
Yep.
And I just can't even express how how that moment felt in my body, but it was unlike
Mhm.
anything I'd felt before.
Mhm.
And looking back, I think, okay, that my nervous system, my sensitivity was just being completely overloaded in that
Mm.
moment,
Mhm.
and it gives me a lot of self-compassion, thankfully, looking back, and to see it through that lens rather than, oh, I was a inadequate mother, or I'm underprepared for this, or
Right.
I can't do it.
Right.
But it's so hard to feel that way in the moment if we don't know what's happening to
Mhm.
us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Mm.
So then, yeah, if you would like to start off with some kind of maybe fundamentals and
Mm.
understanding HSP and what it means to be an HSP parent.
Sure. Yeah. So, there is a technical sort of acronym that I'll get to in a moment, but I think, as a therapist, what I see most often coming across my Zoom screen or in person is a few different things that I hear highly sensitive parents say. One of which is that they feel like their children are too much at times,
Mhm.
or they can't handle it,
Mhm.
but they feel guilty for taking time away. They feel like a
Mhm.
bad mom or a bad
Mhm.
parent
Mhm.
for um, needing or craving downtime, or for not wanting to get down and play in a very physical way with their children. So there's some guilt, unfortunately, that I hear a lot.
Right.
Um, there's a often a hard time kind of keeping up with the demands of parenthood, and a
Mhm.
lot of these are external demands, like societal pressures to attend a bunch of baby classes, or do a bunch of outings with your baby. And those, it's not that those don't always work for HSP parents, but usually we don't. uh, Doing a bunch of those, it does not feel good for us. It's too
Right.
much.
Yep.
Yeah. And then I also hear, and this is one that people feel a lot of shame about, is rage or irritability or a desire to escape.
Mhm.
This sort of like escapist fantasy, if I could just take a vacation by myself, or sleep in
Yeah.
a hotel room for one night,
Mhm.
or I just don't want to be with my baby right now, or I'm finding myself losing my temper and yelling at my kid.
Mhm.
Um, so there's a lot of shame that comes up when people experience those. And yet, if we can shift the focus to recognize that those emotional experiences are often a product of simple overstimulation,
Mhm.
then we have a path forward to heal, to make some changes that are going to lead to parenting feeling less overwhelming and more sustainable.
Yeah.
And then lastly, people just losing touch with who they are, kind of being subsumed in this parent role. Again, not exclusive to HSP parents, but because we tend to be so diligent, we tend to be
Mhm.
really connected with other people, the sort of parenting hat or the motherhood hat can feel really all consuming. So,
Yep. Yeah,
yeah.
absolutely. Right. So, I mean, that's really important to kind of be able to recognize it in yourself. Your examples are helpful because otherwise you don't know.
Hmm.
You might be not sure what is anxiety, what is being feeling highly sensitive or being highly sensitive, and what is quote unquote normal,
Mhm.
or common, and what's not.
Sure.
So you just can't recognize it until you have those examples.
Yeah. Yeah. So there is this acronym that is helpful in kind of explaining HSP more scientifically. I feel like it's helpful to lead with kind of those more concrete examples of what
Mm-hmm.
a lot of HSP parents experience. But the DOES acronym, this is again Dr. Aaron's work here, it stands for depth of processing is the D. So being really aware of values and decision making around parenting. Is typically how that shows up really reflective and thoughtful.
Mm-hmm.
This is the big one, is being overstimulated easily. So, your nervous system can get over aroused and just feel these moments with your children can feel very intense. So usually it's sensory inputs, clutter,
Mm.
crying,
Mm-hmm.
stinky diaper pails,
Mm-hmm.
even stuff like cuddling or feeding your child, which can feel really good and nourishing, but the next moment, all of a sudden it can feel too much. And there's just a need
Right.
for space and for alone time.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where a lot of the guilt can come in.
Yeah.
And
I
can
like how that you said that, like, in the next moment, because it can feel like that for sure. Like you're okay, okay, and then you're not. And you're
totally.
just like, ah.
Yes.
And it can feel intense right away. So yeah,
Mm,
thanks for bringing that in. Mm.
yeah. Yeah. Right. And I think sometimes we don't even notice, a lot of us can be out of touch with our bodies. So we might not even notice those sort of more minute sensations in the
Mm.
moment of feeling overwhelmed. And
Mm-hmm.
or we don't attend to them. We notice them and we ignore because we have pressing needs. We're trying to take care
Right.
of our kids.
Right.
And so that can, show up if it's not attended to, with stomach aches or headaches or panic
Mm. Mm.
attacks, muscle tension, all sorts of things. So HSP parents tend to be a bit more prone to those sort of physical manifestations of
Mm-hmm.
overstimulation as well. So that's something to look out for if you're noticing a lot of that in yourself. It
Yeah.
may be rooted in overstimulation.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And then E is about empathy. This is a real gift. I mean, a lot of these are gifts. It's the
Right.
double-edged sword, right? They
Yeah.
can be gifts, and they can also create challenges for us. So empathy is a real gift that we can offer to our children, but also if we're so emotionally connected with them and they're crying and we start to become really upset and dysregulated ourselves, it makes it more difficult to move through our day. It makes it more
Mm.
difficult to resolve whatever is going on. So but it can also create a really powerful bond with our children, and that's one of the sort of HSP parent superpowers, that
Mm-hmm.
we tend to be really connected and we tend to know what our kids need intuitively. And lastly, we have sensitivity to subtle stimuli. So that's the last of the DOES acronym.
Mm-hmm.
Again, sort of has to do with attunement to our environment, being really protective of our children. It can be a lot if it's kind of paired with anxiety. It can lead to definitely some postpartum anxiety
Mm-hmm.
experiences, but also some immense pleasure from, those like cuddles and smelling our baby and how cute they are and how squishy. And so this
Mm-hmm.
sensitivity to subtle stimuli can be a real gift and a real pleasure as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for breaking that down. Those are
Mm,
some really key factors that, again, I think, like, most parents don't, highly sensitive people don't know about. I mean, we're not really
mhm.
taught about it. We can find out the hard way. Um,
Yes.
so right, that is super duper important. And as you said, like, a lot of what shows up in the overwhelm is that the overstimulation.
Mm-hmm.
And uh that's tough, because
Mm-hmm.
you can't, it's not like you can't always turn that off or
Right.
step away.
Yeah, yeah. So sometimes it's like literally, especially with the really little ones, it's like a safety issue. Like we can't just leave,
Right.
or at least not easily, right? We have to like arrange care or whatever.
Right.
Um, but there's also, I've noticed for a lot of HSP parents, the logistical block is there, but it's also a real mental block a lot of the times
Mm.
because of this narrative of Well, I see other parents doing this. Like that mom over there, like loves to take her kids out on multiple outings per week. Like, why can't I do that? Why
Mhm.
I must be falling short somewhere. And so there's this guilt piece of um, thinking that taking breaks or thinking that being overwhelmed by your child is bad or morally wrong. And I see people get caught up with that all the time. And in fact, looking at it through the lens of just physical overstimulation and your nervous system kind of getting a little too keyed up,
Mm.
I think can be really freeing for people because it's not about that you're not cut out for it or that you don't love your child or that you're a bad parent. It's about
Right.
your body simply needing a break, your body being extra attuned, which is a beautiful gift at times, but also means that you need to really take the time to give it breaks to really nourish it. And so I think recognizing that can give highly sensitive parents the permission they need to push past or to release the guilt that they might initially feel when they're overstimulated and to instead listen to themselves, listen to their bodies, and take care of themselves.
Yeah, it's so necessary. And really one of the hardest things to do to give permission to ourselves. I don't, that guilt is so incredibly strong.
Mm-hmm.
It's one of those things that's it seems like the hardest, guilt and shame,
Mm-hmm.
seem like the hardest to move through, and to not let go of, but allow yourself to drop it for now.
Yes.
Um, and I think what you're saying too is, especially with highly sensitive parents.
Mm-hmm.
Certainly, other people have guilt and shame, but it's such a big. What did you say? Wall or block or
Yeah,
it's
barrier or
a
block.
barrier. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
It's so hard to move past that.
Yes.
Because the like sense of responsibility wins most of the time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and in fact, and you may have experienced this in your work as well, but a lot of the time when I see this a little bit unfortunate, but when I see highly sensitive parents finally making that change or that shift, those shifts to take care of themselves, it's when they hit a massive wall of,
Hmm.
for me, it was a panic attack. It could look
Hmm.
different for somebody else, but it can be sort of this big wake up call or this experience of, like I said, wanting to leave. Like, I just can't handle this anymore. And
Yeah, yeah.
like, I don't know how I'm going to wake up tomorrow and do this again.
Hmm.
And so often it takes these somewhat sometimes scary thoughts or just big feelings or sensations to wake us up to the reality that this is not working the way that I'm
Mm.
doing it. To pour myself out completely and to not attend to my needs is not functional for me, and it's not functional for my child. And that's
Mhm.
usually where the
Mhm.
HSP parent can start to make changes. I hope this is helpful in supporting people to make changes before they get to that point. But I often see
Yes,
it
yes.
where they're realizing, oh my gosh, I'm so depleted, or I'm losing day to day functioning, and that's impacting my child. I I guess I need to make a change, and then it gives them permission to take breaks, to ask
Mhm,
for help,
mhm.
to shift things about their environment that help reduce overwhelm and overstimulation. It's in service of their child. And so if you can't give yourself permission yet for your own love of yourself, then consider maybe how it's impacting and this is a tough one to look at too, but how it's
Yeah.
impacting your parenting or your how you are with your child. I know for me often it would show up as irritability or
Mhm.
just frustration, and that didn't feel good either. And so
Right.
recognizing, um, okay, if I take the time, if I can take 15 minutes to go lay down in a dark room
Mhm.
away from my kids, I'm a better parent after that. And I like that. I want that to be the case. And it also is good for me.
Yeah, absolutely. But it is hard to see that, taking care of yourself in that way is also taking care of your relationship
Mhm.
and taking care of your kids. It's a super hard, um, a barrier to break through because we're conditioned to not,
Right.
to just push through and keep going and all these really ridiculous things.
Yes.
So
Uh,
ridiculous.
yes, absolutely.
If we can go back to some of the things you were talking about, specifically about sensory overload and stress, and what I really resonate with is having so many expectations on you at the same time, and how that impacts stress. Yeah, if we
Mm.
can go into that a bit, would be great.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I've talked a little bit about the nervous system, and that would be a whole other episode, honestly, of HSPs and
Right.
nervous system, or parents and nervous system. But really, basically, your nervous system is responsible for keeping you safe. It's responsible for kind of scanning your environment and saying, hey, am I okay? Am I is there a danger? Is there a threat coming?
Mm-hmm.
And HSPs, actually, this is a gift. That this is why HSPs exist, is that our trait has been conserved, evolutionarily conserved, because we do a service to society by sort of scanning our environment, physical and emotional and otherwise, to say, how is everything doing out here?
Mm,
Do we need to be worried about this physical threat? Do we need to be worried about sort of how these relationships are going? And
yeah.
then we are kind of, I think of us as like the prairie dogs of humanity. We're kind of up here
Yes.
looking around saying,
I
what's
love
going
it.
on? Um,
Uh-huh.
so it's a real gift, but you can see how, for parents, when we're constantly scanning for danger, for threat, ooh, like that is a recipe for anxiety
Mm,
and
mm,
overstimulation. Um, so not only are HSP brains sort of primed to notice a lot more and to connect the dots, um, but we feel things more deeply too. So when we're taking in these multiple stimuli, for example, uh, the example I shared earlier, when I had that really intense panic attack when the baby was crying, I think he was also nursing. He was like trying to latch. So there was like physical and auditory inputs.
mhm.
The toddler was climbing on my back. So there was like pressure at the back of my neck, and oh, it just felt so bad. And sort of an emotional demand in that situation too. My toddler
Yeah.
was kind of requesting some like emotional attention. So you can see how a nervous system that's kind of primed to scan for danger and to be taking in all these inputs at once, and suddenly I have all of these physical inputs, and we can experience the same thing. We're cooking dinner and the TV's on and the laundry machine is going rah, 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 rah in the background, right? Like these are all physical inputs. And then, of course, HSP parents have societal inputs too, right? Like Instagram, you should be
Mhm.
doing this. Like if you're a
Mm.
good parent, this is how you should look or behave. Um, Parenting experts. So these are not bad things inherently. It's just there's so much coming at us. Dr. Google, like medical
Mhm.
advice coming from all, and parenting advice coming from all corners. So these are also overstimulating for the HSP parent when we have so many opinions and expectations coming at us. And we don't want to let people down. A lot of us HSPs are people pleasers. We don't like it when we make other people uncomfortable, or when we create extra work for other people, or that's what it feels like for us. So we try to juggle it all ourselves, and that causes immense stress. So I'm guessing even just listening to the list of factors that I just went through is maybe causing your blood pressure to rise a little bit. So maybe take a deep breath here, and but if you're resonating with it, yeah, these multiple competing demands, they're real. Like you said, Dr. Kat, they're not easy to let go of. That's
Right.
to release the guilt, or to release the I should be doing this.
Right,
So
because it's almost like the list you were giving isn't of things that could be impacting us or that we're taking in. It's not like we can see like, oh, that's a thing. I don't have to do that right now. I can set it
mhm,
aside. It's like you get the tidal wave of everything, and somehow you're supposed to hold all of it and do all of
right,
it all at the same time.
right. Yeah.
It's too, and it does too much.
Mm,
There's like you experienced a panic attack. I would have experienced like when my kids were really little, just like a full crying
mhm,
breakdown, like needing
mm,
to, not
mhm,
necessarily feeling panic, but just like almost like a depressed feeling, like there's no way I
mm.
can do all of this.
Oh yeah.
Um, Uh,
disconnect,
yeah, yeah.
or like
Mhm.
anger,
Mhm.
irritability,
Oh,
frustration.
yeah.
They're all responses to basically the same thing, in my opinion.
Mhm. Mhm.
Um, yeah.
Yeah, for sure. And it it's hard to, I mean, it's a skill, and I think that you're going to talk about some of that later, but to be able to learn to set some of that down, and like you said before, it's okay. You know, like
Mhm.
this guilt is really present, but man, once you can figure out how to set that stuff down, it is like that freedom you described.
Yeah. Yeah. And honestly, a lot of the work that I've done with people in therapy is really like teaching people to give themselves permission to set
Mm.
those expectations down and to
Mhm.
sort through them and say, is this an expectation that I want to have for myself, or is
Mm.
this my parents' expectation, or is this society's expectation, or is this my partner's expectation that I need
Mm.
to set a little bit of a boundary on?
Mhm.
So I think there's a lot of that, but it is hard again because it's sort of our people pleasing tendencies, and not all HSPs have that, but a lot of us do.
Mhm.
That can really prevent us from, or make it extra challenging for us to sort through and say, I'm going to give myself permission to release that expectation, or to release this pressure that I'm putting on myself as a parent.
Mhm.
So it really takes some uh, introspection,
Mhm.
some honesty with yourself about what it is that you're taking on, and um, what it is that's actually important to you, and are there things that you can set aside, not because they're not important necessarily, but
Right.
because we can't be juggling 50 balls at once.
Right. No, not at all. What so um how do you do that?
Yeah. Oh man, that's a big question.
Right.
Yeah, but there's a few thoughts that are or tips that I can offer here. Again, I mean, therapy tends to be really helpful for a lot of highly sensitive parents, myself included, when I was in that stage, and now I'm offering it to people in
Mhm.
that stage, and it's to be seen, to be recognized for what it is you're doing is perhaps the most critical part of all of this.
Yep, agreed.
Yeah. But beyond that, things that people can take from this episode and kind of try out. One is micro breaks. So, I know Elaine Aron's research talks about how HSPs ideally need about 2 hours of alone time today. And
Mhm.
when I hear that as a parent, my kids are 5 and 8 now, so they're in school, and I often do get that time. But man, when they were babies, I did not, and that
Nope.
was laughable to me. Two
Mhm, mhm,
hours, I was like, I'm
mhm,
lucky if I get 20 minutes.
mhm.
So maybe it is 20 minutes for you, and that's better than nothing.
Yep.
So those micro breaks, can look like a lot of different things, but it literally can look like, going into the bathroom and shutting the door.
Mhm,
When if you're at home with your kids and that's all you can take. It can look like, having a partner or a friend watch your kids and if it's your partner, of course, it's not watching your kids. It's, you're sharing the load, and that's a
mhm.
whole other conversation again.
Yep.
But really sort of asking for that help, or saying,
Mhm,
hey, this is what I need right now.
mhm,
I'm going to go lay down for 20 minutes. Or if you're checking in with yourself and you think, gosh, I'm feeling stir crazy, I need to get out of the house for a run, or for a yoga class, or to meet up with a friend. So really just checking in with yourself and noticing what it is you need. And if you can't get out for an hour or get 2 hours of alone time, then give yourself the gift of 5 minutes in the bathroom by yourself, or
mhm,
10 minutes laying down after your partner,
mhm,
can take the kids, if you're the one who's watching them for the day. So those micro breaks can be really, really helpful for HSPs. And it's kind of a similar concept of giving yourself a buffer zone. So if you're
mhm.
like me, a working outside the home parent, it can be really hard to transition from one task or kind of one role to another. So giving
Yep.
yourself that 10-15 minutes whenever you can to just be you, to not be, a teacher or a therapist or whatever else you are, and to just be you, and to not be a
Mhm,
parent yet,
mhm, mhm.
can really be helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's so important. It absolutely is. And one of the, I think for me, working with people, the most difficult thing is that because they're holding so much. When there is a break, when they don't have to do direct childcare, they
Mhm.
will fill it with other things.
Mm,
So like the break time ends up being dishes and
mhm.
laundry and all the other things that they, need two hands to do,
Yeah.
or whatever, like filling it with other tasks. And um, if they don't, the feeling is like if they don't do it, then when is it going to get done?
Mhm.
Um, and yes, that's a question that might need some answering, but man, is it hard to break that cycle.
I
Um,
totally hear you, and to be honest with you, one of my pet peeves is when people like me are just saying, "Oh, just take more time to yourself." And it's like, "Well, Like I have real like the dishes are a real thing that actually needs to get done. They don't just go away because wish them away." So yeah, I hear you on that, and I think uh again, it's about finding that balance. I know for
mhm.
me, I also like to kind of just keep on top of things. I like to keep my
Mm,
house relatively uncluttered because it
mhm.
makes me crazy. Like it just makes me so
Yeah, like
overstimulated with
exactly
clutter.
to your point. That is the thing. Like I've there's the like how do you figure out, yes, I need a break, but the clutter also makes me feel like
Mm,
overstimulated. So what do I do?
okay.
It's so I'm not saying like you specifically are need to answer this right now, but it is um I mean, I wouldn't say I've had to argue with clients about this, but
I
but
hear
it is
you.
like it is a real thing to have to figure out like which overstimulation are you going to manage. And
Totally. Oh my gosh. No, this is funny. I hear the same thing from my clients, and I've
mhm.
wrestled with the same thing personally too. And
Yep.
you know, one thing that I have found personally very helpful is setting timers.
Mhm.
And well, two things. One is creating a like kind of a cozy corner, whether that is your bedroom. For a lot of people, it's going to be your bedroom because hopefully your kids' toys are not like all over the floor in there,
Right,
and
right,
you
right.
can kind of have exert a little more control over the clutter
Mhm.
level and how peaceful it feels. So kind of having this space that even if the rest of the house feels like a disaster zone to you, that you can kind of withdraw and not be again scanning your environment and thinking, oh, clutter,
Yes.
clutter, clutter,
Yes,
right?
yes,
Like
yes.
that's overstimulating.
Mhm.
So having a place that you're fairly diligent about maintaining as your quiet zone is
Mhm.
super important. And
Mhm.
then like I said, for me, setting timers has been helpful in those moments where I feel like I'm pulled in a bunch of different directions. Like,
Yeah,
"Ugh, I should
yeah.
be preparing dinner. I also should be responding to that email, and I should be doing this."
Right.
And but I can usually feel in my body, that I'm reaching a certain threshold where I'm like,
Yeah, yeah,
I'm
yeah.
not gonna do super well at this, or I'm gonna be
Yeah.
really grumpy later if I don't take a break right now. And
Mhm.
so again, I literally will set a timer on my phone for 10 minutes, 20 minutes, 30 minutes, whatever you can fit in. And that actually really does a good job of like freeing up space for me to fully relax into whatever it is that I'm doing. And often it's like laying on the couch and reading or watching a show or
Mhm.
going on a walk
Mhm.
outside. But it gives me permission to do that fully for that 20 minutes. And they
I
say,
love
and then
that.
after that, I will move on to this other very important real task.
Yeah, yeah. I love, love, love that idea because then you can do both
Mhm.
if you're, not interrupted. But
Sure.
that's the other part. But right, yeah. I mean, you can honor all of multiple things by
Mhm.
having that boundary with your time.
Mhm.
That's
Mhm.
super good. Thanks for that.
Good,
Yep.
good. Yeah. And then I guess the last little tip I'll offer here is just about sensory input. And this might seem obvious, but I also see guilt and shame coming in here, which is that our children create a lot of sensory input. They create noise, they create stinky items of clothing, they touch us, they
Mhm.
make sticky messes, right? So these are inherently overstimulating. This
Yeah.
has nothing to do with how much we love our children or how good of a parent we are. It
Mhm.
just is those inputs are a lot for our body to handle. So giving yourself permission to reduce it where you can. The most obvious thing here is wearing some noise canceling or noise reducing headphones. Um, and sometimes parents feel bad about this, like, well, what will I not hear my kid, or like is that will that hurt their feelings? And they make really like small, unobtrusive ones. I know like Loop does a good job with that,
Mhm.
for example. But I will say, do you really need to hear your crying child or your tantruming toddler at 100% volume? Like you probably could do a much better, at least I know I could do a much better job responding if I was hearing them at like a 30% volume. I still know what's going on, but my body is not getting super activated and overwhelmed by the noise itself. and
Mhm.
and if I can reduce that overwhelm, I can actually be a lot more productive and constructive in the way that I respond to that situation.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you're reminding me there was like a certain pitch that would
Mm,
of crying or of like even happy noises. It doesn't have to be
totally. Yeah.
crying. Um Man, little kids have quite a range of of sound and volume. But right,
Mhm.
that would that was it for me. I
Mhm.
would absolutely feel like my head was going to explode.
Mhm. Yeah.
But if at that time I had, noise canceling headphones or things that I knew could help reduce that volume, it would have helped tremendously.
Yeah.
Because right, you can still attend to things.
Mhm.
Um, but when you're I don't know if you find this, but if I'm starting to get overstimulated, let's say the TV's on. If
Mhm.
I'm starting to get overstimulated, it almost sounds like the volume has been turned up a lot.
Mm.
Even though it's still the same, like nothing has changed.
Yeah.
But somehow or another, the sensitivity just makes it sound louder. And
Totally.
that's like how it can feel in your environment. It could be that nothing has changed,
Mhm.
uh, but your needs have changed.
So true. Right. Yeah. If your nervous system has kind of been activated, it
Mm-hmm.
is you're gonna feel that or sense that input more strongly. And so, I think a tip sort of similar to that is just checking in with yourself and noticing what is bothering me right now. Like if
Mm-hmm.
you feel
Mm-hmm.
yourself starting to feel irritable or grumpy, asking yourself, what do I need? But also, what
Mm-hmm.
is there something that's causing me to feel this way that is maybe, and usually it's a bunch of different things, but maybe there's something really simple. Like I know for me, I had an old dishwasher for a while that just made the worst noise. It was so loud and grating, and it really bothered me, and it made a noticeable difference in my mood when I
Mm-hmm.
was hearing it. And so eventually it kind of broke, and I jumped on the opportunity to get a new very quiet dishwasher.
Right, right.
But there might be things like that a kitchen fan or like a really bright, like cold light in your house that is
Yep.
causing or is contributing to your
Mm-hmm.
overstimulation,
Mm-hmm.
or particular toy that your kid doesn't even play with anymore but somehow ends up all over the floor every day, right? So just noticing those
Mm-hmm.
inputs and realizing, oh, maybe I could let go of that, or maybe I can reduce the intensity of that. um and outside the house too, right? Like limiting your time at really chaotic environments. Maybe for me, I go to the grocery store at like 8 a.m. if I can help it, instead
Mm-hmm.
of 4 p.m. on a Friday, because I know I'm going to be a lot happier doing that. So just noticing what bothers you, and seeing if there's little tweaks that you can make in your environment. They'll add up. It's not going to solve everything right away, but they do add up.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Oh, that's perfect. Right, because the little tweaks are way more doable than,
Mhm.
escaping and to the beach
Mhm.
for a week or
Right. I mean, don't write that off right away, of
Oh,
course.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
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 But yeah, I mean, in lieu of getting that, whenever we need it, we can make these little shifts, and look for and give ourselves permission to take those longer breaks too. Whether
Mm,
it's getting a date night or having someone watch your kids so you can have a spa day or a day off, outside of the house. Those are also really really
mhm.
important for highly sensitive parents to do. They just can feel a little bit more. They are more difficult to make happen. So.
Yeah, it is one of the things that I've heard that a lot of parents with little ones want is for them to be able to stay home and everybody else to leave.
Yeah.
And that is the one of the harder ones. It's much easier to just take you and go, but
Yeah.
sometimes you just want to be in your house by yourself, like
Yes.
with nothing.
Hmm.
But man, that's a hard one to
It
get.
is. It is. Yeah.
So right then, having 10 minutes in your bedroom
Hmm.
is maybe what you can do today.
Right. Right.
Hmm.
Yeah. And as you get more sort of evolved down this process, this road of attending to your own needs, maybe you get a little more comfortable with saying like to your parent or to a good friend, "Hey, do you mind? Would you like to take my kid to the park for a couple hours? Like that would be amazing." Or,
Right.
to a partner. So, not underestimating the importance of having someone else watch your child for a bit. This is something I could really get on my soapbox about, but parents, we were not meant to parent 24/7. And
Right.
often that's seen, it's kind of like implicit more than explicit, but it's kind of seen as the gold standard of being like a quote good mom is to like want to be with your kid 24/7. And that
Yeah,
like if you
no.
need a break, that's
Mm-mm.
like you've done something wrong or that you're not living up to what you should. So,
Mm-hmm.
really kind of dismantling that
Yeah.
false narrative around
Yeah.
parents, good parents wanting to or being able to be with their kids 24/7. That's not how we evolved in terms of humanity. We always had, we were in villages for the most part or small communities where we had help. It wasn't even considered help. It's just everyone was pitching in
Right.
and spending time with our children. And so many of us, in the Western modern world, we see motherhood or parenthood as a um, kind of a full-time endeavor. And in some
Mm-hmm.
ways it always will be, but really kind of giving yourself permission um, to see breaks not as sort of a weakness or something that, oh, I guess I need that, but as part of what parenting has always been and should still be.
Yeah, absolutely. It makes it more sustainable.
Hmm.
Like this is a marathon.
Hmm.
Not to put it in terms of, I was trying to say marathon versus sprint, but um, not to make it sound bad. I mean, I'm sure some people love to run marathons. I'm not. I'm not saying anything about that. But right, this is a long term kind of thing. So how do you
Yeah.
manage in a way that makes it sustainable so that
Yeah.
you're not like me having the meltdowns, and crying or having panic attacks.
Hmm.
But it does require other people,
Hmm.
um, and I think that's hard for HSPs.
It is
Uh,
hard. And COVID totally put a, wrench
mhm.
in that for many, many HSP
Yes,
parents,
yeah, right.
in sometimes a very traumatic way
Hmm.
of not
Hmm.
having that support that we absolutely need.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, for sure. So, in the beginning of our chat, you talked about empathy being a gift, and some of the ways in which being an HSP has gifts. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yes, I'd love to. That's something that a lot of us HSP parents miss, at least initially, because we just see the hardships or the challenges of our sensitivity. And that's a real shame because HSPs have so much to offer to ourselves, to our loved ones, and to our children. So yes, the main gifts really are empathy and attunement. So really, just to define empathy briefly, is to be able to feel with other people, to be able to understand or kind of intuitively know what they're feeling. In fact, HSPs have more active mirror neurons than the general population, meaning that our brain cells that are responsible for um, reading and kind of reflecting back other people's emotions are sort of the volumes turned up for HSPs. So we have this real tangible gift um, to notice what other people are feeling and thinking, and to experience that sometimes in our own bodies, which, as I said, it can be too much sometimes, but um, where it shows up as a strength for us as parents is that we really feel a deep connection with our children often. Doesn't always happen right away. So I don't want to put that out there that like there's this instant first, connection with our child the first time we see them. Sometimes it
Mhm.
takes some time, and
Mhm.
that's totally normal. But often we have a sense, we know them really deeply as a person. Um, we have a sense if something's not quite right with them, whether emotionally or they're uncomfortable, we'll kind of pick up on that and be able to hone in on it more easily. So an example that I've seen come up is, a baby, crying and the parent being like, that cry doesn't sound quite right for like a normal, hungry or tired cry. And they pick up on, oh, this like tag is itching them, or they realize like I think they have an ear infection. So they just
Mhm.
were able to kind of pick up often a little more quickly and a little more easily on things that might not be going quite right with our child, or even just positive emotions, right? We're picking up on that, we're able to mirror that back to them and really
Yeah.
sort of create an amplified emotional exchange with our children. um, so that's lovely. The other couple things that I think are talked about a little bit less are we're able to create a calm and peaceful home environment a lot of the time. We're not perfect at this, but
Mhm. Mhm.
we were both sharing earlier about how clutter is a real challenge for us,
Mhm.
and so
Mhm.
often HSPs are really thoughtful about what we want our home to feel like or what we want our child's environment to feel like. And we're diligent about whether emotionally or physically creating the type of childhood that is just going to really nourish and empower our children.
Mhm.
Again, not that non-HSPs don't do this, but it's just it's something that comes a bit more naturally to many HSPs
Mhm.
because we're tuned and we're reflective about how we want to parent and how we want our children to feel in their childhood.
Mhm.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah. And then,
I think if I can for a second, I am thinking of when you were describing it, it made me think of some examples of when that attunement, like let's say one parent is an HSP and the other is not,
mhm,
how the one parent's attunement with the child, let's say like, oh, I think it's an ear infection.
mhm,
The other parent might, um, may or may not like discount it, like, oh no, they're fine,
mhm,
or even because you might be a more highly attuned parent, you pick up on things that are wrong, like going wrong and right. And again, not that the other parent is not, but it's it is sometimes easy for the, let's say, non-HSP parent to view the HSP parent as being too anxious. You're always
mhm.
worried about things. That, like, that kind of it's
Yeah.
a misconception of what's going on.
Mhm,
And sometimes they are anxious about stuff. I'm not going to say that we're not.
mhm.
I'm talking about myself, but it's sometimes can be hard to be that attuned because
Mm.
other people that might not perceive things as with as much, sorry, with as much, I guess, intuition.
Mhm.
um
Yeah. It's so funny you mentioned that. I was just having a conversation with a client about this, and I won't share what they said, but it reminded me of an experience that I had when I
mhm,
when my baby was I don't know, maybe 1.5, where I like lost an earring at a friend's house, and I found the back of it, but the stud with the pointy piece I couldn't
mhm,
find.
mhm,
And
mhm,
my
mhm.
son was at the age where he was, picking stuff up and putting it in his mouth.
Yep.
And I was of course, I mean, I'm sure everyone listening to this is like, oh no, my gosh, I was so anxious about it. And my husband was like, my husband's not an HSP, by the way. He was like, I doubt he found it, like maybe the dog ate it, I don't know, I'm sure it's okay. And I was like, no, we are taking him to the ER right now, we're getting him x-rayed, I'm not risking this. And we ended up literally, as we were peeling out, our friends ran out and we said we found the other half of the earring, so everything was fine. But
Mhm.
yeah, there's just, these we tend to be more cautious, and we
Yeah.
do tend towards anxiety. And I think you put a good point out there that sometimes that anxiety is adaptive and it's very protective for a child. And
Mhm.
so, in fact, I'm just reading Elaine Aron's book on the highly sensitive child right
Mhm.
now, and she's talking about how there's some evidence that children of HSP parents are less accident prone, and
Mhm.
HSP children are less accident prone actually as well because they're just more diligent and they're
Yeah,
more
yeah.
aware of the risks and dangers. So it's yes, on the one hand, it's protective, but ooh, like the flip side of that is that a lot of us can spend a lot of time worrying. I see lots of HSP parents go down like the Dr. Google rabbit hole, for
Mhm.
example, and just
Mhm.
get really stuck and ruminating on all the things that could go wrong or
Mhm.
all the what ifs. And um, that's so hard, and it can be a real detriment to our mental health. But how do we? It's really difficult to know where to draw that line of
Mhm. Mhm.
if this anxiety or this awareness, this turned up awareness is protective for our child, where do we say, but it's harmful for me? I'm
Mhm.
suffering
Mhm.
because I'm aware of all the risks and scanning
Mhm.
constantly.
Mhm.
So it can be really tough to draw that boundary. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I do think it's hard when the attunement, well, not attunement, but like that a level of awareness intersects with anxiety, because it's really sometimes hard to tell the difference,
Mm-hmm.
especially if your attunement and your intuition is right
Yeah,
sometimes. And
absolutely.
like,
Yeah.
how do you know if this is anxiety or if it's just me being aware? And
Yeah.
sometimes you don't
You
know.
don't. Yeah.
It's hard. So like, yeah. Anyways, I know we were meaning to talk about the gifts, and it is clearly a gift. So I took us down a little bit of a road. Um,
Yeah, yeah. That's okay.
um,
And I didn't really answer your question either about the other partner if they are non-HSP. And yes, I don't know that I have much more to add on that, but
yeah.
it can be a strain on relationships too
Hmm.
if, your sensitivity is misunderstood, or if you are an HSP and your spouse isn't, and or your partner isn't, and you're frustrated with them for being
Yeah.
less attuned. Like,
Yes,
didn't
yes,
you
yes.
smell the baby's diaper? Like, and they're like, no, I didn't. What are you talking
Uh-huh.
about? And
Uh-huh.
they're like, oh God, like, why am I always the one to do this?
Right.
So there's
Yeah.
all sorts of like partner dynamics that can
Hmm.
come up.
Yeah. Again, also for another
Another
episode, but
episode. Yeah.
there are many things that we could talk about in relation to this. But I do want to like go back to what you were saying, and emphasize and leverage. I think you were saying
Mhm.
this in within parenting.
Yeah. Yeah. So, another couple of the gifts. One is being able to experience or being motivated to experience beautiful things with our
Mm,
children. And
mm,
this is kind of an intangible to some extent, but for example, I have one of my kids is an HSP, and I love taking him out to, beautiful places in nature, or taking him out to see the symphony or to see a show. And he experiences it in a similar way to I do that I do, and it's a gift to me, but it's also lovely to just experience those things together and have him say, "Oh, look at that! Look at the spider web sparkling with dew. It's so pretty this morning." And
yep.
so just being able to experience those things together, whereas someone who's not scanning the environment, kind of not noticing as much, might just walk right by that spider web.
Yep.
So we have these really beautiful moments with our children, in the midst of some chaos sometimes,
Hmm.
and similarly we can take a lot of pleasure in connecting with our children physically and emotionally. So like I said earlier, those cuddles, my 8-year-old HSP boy still asks me for daily cuddles, and it's the sweetest
Yes, mine
thing.
too.
It's
I love it.
I was just thinking, oh, I wonder how much longer. But I've asked him before. I said, do you think like when you're a teenager, you're still going to want to cuddle mommy? He's like, well, I think so. And he just, it's different. I have a non-HSP kid, and we just have, so this is a little bit about having an HSP child versus not. But gosh, I love that. And sometimes I don't. Sometimes I'm like, no, mommy needs space. But
Yep. Yep.
being able to really sink into and be aware of these moments of connection with our kids,
Hmm.
and to I just take so much pleasure in like looking at my kids' beautiful little faces, and watching them perform and various sports or music, and
Hmm.
or just having these sweet little moments with them. So just I think our sort of mindfulness is another I haven't put it that way before, but that's kind of another HSP superpower as a parent is
Mhm, mhm,
we can slow down when we give ourselves permission to slow
mhm.
down and be present. We can experience and point out to our children these beautiful moments. And then, lastly is um, teaching our kids emotional attunement. So, my husband, not to throw him under the bus here, but he's not an HSP. And he said to me multiple times, like, I'm so glad you know how to talk to our kids about their feelings. And it's not that he's like some Neanderthal, like he's great at it too, but
Right.
I just have a little bit more because I've needed to do that work within myself as a highly
Mhm.
sensitive person.
Yeah,
I,
yeah,
I
yeah.
have a bit more language around how to acknowledge and name my children's feelings and say,
Right,
it looks
right.
like you're feeling a little overwhelmed, or, um, it seems like this noise is overstimulating for you. Why don't we step outside and have a snack? Or,
Yeah, totally.
do you need some alone time? I'm
Mhm.
feeling like I need some alone time too.
Mhm.
This was a long day. And so, really being able to name that for our kids, to teach them how to regulate their own emotions and how to honor them. I mean,
Right.
again, lots of parents can do this, but HSPs are especially good at it. And we should really celebrate
Agreed.
that.
Agreed. Agreed. Yeah, absolutely. I was kind of resonating with you through that whole thing that you were just saying. It's like because we can see details of things in a way that other people may or may not, but or might just pass by, like you said, the nuance of
Oh, yeah.
like being able to notice a shift in your child's like state,
Mm,
their emotional state, their mental, whatever's going on. Um, yeah, that is pretty cool
mm,
to be able to do. I definitely see that as a gift.
right.
Um,
Yeah, I think that we're not just always jumping to like, oh, they're acting out or like, why are they doing this
yes,
again? But we're
yes.
seeing, oh, they're overtaxed, they're tired, they, whoa,
Mhm.
they're maybe hungry, or
Mhm.
this room's really loud. And so
Mhm.
instead of just being angry at our child for, not participating or for getting irritable, we're
Mhm.
able to kind of intuit what they might be feeling,
Mhm.
name it for them, and then actually address the root of the problem rather
Right.
than responding, with frustration to their behavior.
Yeah. Super cool.
Mm,
Yeah, there's also like a really I mean, I guess I'm speaking to like HSP therapists in particular.
mm,
Um it's a really nice intersection of skill sets.
mm,
It just because right, we're trained in many ways on how already on how to do this, and I guess we're also in some ways therapists for a reason.
mhm.
Uh, our HS P qualities may have led us to this as well. Not for everybody for sure, but
Mhm.
um, it's I've just noticed this with a lot of therapists who are also HSPs. It's such a cool
Yeah.
combination of skills that is really useful. And if you can figure out, and this is true for everybody, if you can figure out how to manage it, then it
Mm.
just makes life so much easier.
Right. Right. I think there's moments, as a therapist myself, where I'm like, oh, it's so resonant. Like
Hmm.
being with a client and feeling with them and being able to empower them and be responsive is so, it's like it sings. Like it's this
Yes.
beautiful, just creative energy that can feel like just flowing.
Yep.
And
Yep.
that's a real gift of being a highly sensitive therapist. And then, we need to learn to take care of ourselves. Basically the
Right.
other half of
Right.
that,
We
right?
are practicing what we preach.
Yeah, boundaries, managing your
Hmm.
caseload and all that. But
Hmm.
yeah, oh wow, I think we do have a lot to offer our clients, and especially I think those of us who are at the intersection of sort of HSP and the perinatal field. There's not a whole lot of
Yep.
there's some conversation increasingly, but there's
Hmm.
not a lot out there about how high sensitivity intersects with parenthood. And it
Hmm.
is, to me, it's just like once I started working kind of at that intersection, I'm convinced it's just incredibly important
It
work
is.
you know, 20 to 30% of people are HSPs. That's 20 to 30% of parents who are,
Yep.
resonating with some of the things that we've talked about today. And if we can collectively kind of get the word out
Hmm.
about
Hmm.
how it shows up, it's just, I
Oh,
hope it's
yeah.
very empowering for people.
So cool. I love everything that you've talked about today. This is all like right up my alley, for sure. And I know that you very specifically have some offerings, things that you're providing for people. So where can people find more out about your work and or get supported by what you're doing?
Absolutely. Yeah. So I'm a therapist and a psychotherapist in California. So that's, I practice at Inner Nature Therapy. That's INNER, Nature Therapy, on the therapy side of things. And then I also have a resource website that has some courses and coaching and a blog, and just for highly sensitive parents. And it's simply called Highly Sensitive Parenthood, highlysensitiveparenthood.com, and I'm on Instagram and YouTube under those as well. Um, so right now I have a course for highly sensitive parents to learn to tend to themselves better and to kind of leverage those strengths and minimize the challenges associated with being an HSP parent. And I'm also, probably by the time this gets released, this second course will be released about supporting your highly sensitive child. And so if you are a parent who has a child who's highly sensitive and you want to learn more about how to support them, that's there too. So um, that's all can be found at highlysensitiveparenthood.com. And I'm offering listeners of this podcast 20% off any
Woohoo.
of the products. Yay! Products or services. I have a toolkit, a couple of these courses that I've talked about, and coaching. Simply use the code MOM and MIND. It's all caps and no spaces through the end of 2023 to receive 20% off anything you can find at highlysensitiveparenthood.com.
Cool. Thank you so much. I mean, the skills are necessary, and I'm thankful that you're offering listeners that discount. It's I'm really hopeful that people who are listening who need the support can access that. And
Absolutely. And there
yeah.
is a free newsletter as well too. So if you're like, "Oh, not in the budget right now,"
Mhm.
yeah, still head over to the website and there's a blog and a newsletter you can sign up for. So love to see you there.
Perfect. Perfect. Thank you so much for your time and sharing all of this with us today.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been a real pleasure to chat about sensitivity and parenthood.
To get connected with Amy, find her on her coaching website, highlysensitiveparenthood.com, and on Instagram and Facebook at Highly Sensitive Parenthood. Now, for those of you who go to her website and are interested, she is offering a 20% discount for Mom and Mind listeners through 2023. That's for all year. Just find what you're looking for on her website and type in the coupon code MOM and MIND, spelled out MOMANDMIND. Thank you so much, Amy, for offering that resource to Mom and Mind listeners. And thank you all for listening. Until next time.